How Good evening and welcome to Channel 3 Halifax. I'm Dario Del Degan and thank you for joining us tonight. Today we're going to start by, we're not going to start, we're going to hopefully end up looking into our crystal ball and predicting the future of what Halifax might look like in 5-10 years from now. But before we get to that, let's reflect a little bit on a couple of things that we've lost recently. The first is 95.7 FM, one of our radio stations, as well as Global Atlantic News. These are two major media outlets that were present in Halifax that have instantly disappeared within the last month and a half. As well, we've also noticed that there are some changes to local media. Little guys like myself, Channel 3 Halifax, have started to pop onto the scene. So I think the question to begin with is, what's actually happening to Halifax and who's telling the stories that are that allows Halifax to tell its own stories. And tonight I'm joined by two wonderful guests. I have Blake Priddle, who is a radio host and is an insider into local broadcasting. And I have historian and civic leader William Breckenridge, who is thinking about Halifax as a civic community. So let's mix these perspectives together into our hazy vision of what the future of Halifax might look like. And let's start and open up the discussion with you, Blake. You were on the inside of 95.7 when it closed down. What does it feel like when a local media institution that you've worked for just suddenly disappears?
Oh, it was a huge loss for the city and for the surrounding communities because 95.7 News Radio, it got people up in the morning. It gave them the weather, it gave them traffic, it gave them the morning headlines, something to listen to while they were commuting, something they listened to when they woke up. It's a tremendous loss. And, well, for one thing, the traffic situation in Halifax, certainly hasn't improved. And, we would be the first ones to give, traffic reports at 6 in the morning. We do, traffic every 10 minutes on the ones during the morning and afternoon news wheels. That's a big one. And people listened to the Todd Vino show and Nova Scotia Today. People called in to give their perspectives on certain things, community events, current events, and it's no more. And it's just a tremendous loss. It's really sad.
William, what institutions that have been telling its stories for years are shut down? What does the city actually lose when these storytellers go away?
So what they lose in the sense of community, being able to connect people to place and have an issue or a topic that might be kind of, subverted by government in some ways, be out there to the public and have the public have an open opinion. It creates a better democracy when you do that. And without those platforms in place, then that doesn't happen. You don't have this civic engagement that is required out there.
But now we have social media where everyone's broadcasting their opinions. They're readily available. People can access them at any time. Do we actually need major media institutions to be reporting these stories?
Sure, it's about accuracy and professionalism because you can hear a lot of noise out there. And I've done a lot of civic activity and advocacy, and you can have a lot of opinion. But when you have a radio station that people always go to, they know it's reliable, the person on the other end interviewing you has that experience in kind of being able to direct questions, then that gets that information out there in a particular manner.
So to both of you, are we losing something important with these media closures?
Yes.
Absolutely, 100%. When people listen to the Todd Vino show, not only could people listen to other people's opinions, but then you had a host that helped to keep these people in line and to challenge these opinions, using a voice instead of a keyboard.
William, when you think about a city, not just a place where people live, but as a community, what actually holds it together?
It's more about creating a sense of pride and understanding the geography, understanding the people, how culture has evolved. And when you have those portions in, then that only goes to better the economic importance and values that are around it. And now you see cities just being centered on, well, the money. And Halifax has gotten to that point where you see that kind of mass development, but we aren't, as example, affordability of an apartment. You see, if you keep building, then the prices are going to be coming down. Well, they've been building, and the price has been going up. So is that actually working? No. And that goes back to what you're asking, the question of that, is that what do you want out of your city?
Right.
Can we have anything nice anymore? When a tree in the public gardens is hatcheted, what does that tell us about values as a society?
And then what role do institutions play in making a city?
They play a critical role because, they're the big guy in the room, right? And it's a trickle-down effect that happens with society as a whole, because what people don't understand is that you have to see the city could make like parking, for example. The city said, now you have to pay Saturdays for parking in downtown Halifax. Well, now what? That's going to impact the businesses. You have people saying, well, I can't afford to come down to the downtown anymore to shop.
Right.
And so that impact, they have that's the center. That's kind of a start of where it is. Changing how the taxation of sewers, for example, goes. Because the urban core needs that update done. Piping in Halifax hasn't been really taken care of since 1946. And then you come out to, Heron Cove here, and do you link that piping to the city, or do they still keep it on their own wells or what have you? How far do you extend the city out, and what is the maintenance cost? So those are all decisions made at the municipal government level, and that's the impact. Yeah.
Blake, do you think 95.7 was actually part of creating the city or just reporting on it?
I would say reporting on it. We didn't just cover the city, it was Nova Scotia news as a whole. And with the fact that the city is going to get bigger, I think that we do need more stations like that. Even multicultural stations, big cities like Toronto and New York City, they have, Caribbean music stations, they have, other multicultural stations. I think that's something else that Halifax could benefit from too. And when you don't have, news wheels anymore where you have half an hour newscasts, then listeners are missing out on a lot with other stations that only broadcast for 5 minutes at the top of the hour.
So do you think, both of you, do shared stories make up the fabric of a city?
Absolutely.
For sure. It's very important to have communication and have linkage in every aspect, because without that, how do you create a sense of community in place without connections and telling stories and being able to communicate? And to Blake's point with having different multicultural, well, Halifax has a very diverse cultural, and some people don't speak English yet. They're coming in. So imagine if they could listen to a station and hear, yeah, the traffic is going to be heavy and you're going to be late for wherever you're going, and they can hear it in their language. Those connections matter, and as the city grows, it's something not to be forgotten about.
So are media institutions important to a city, or are we giving it too much credit?
No, it's important to the media is the message, and we have to get that out there.
Blake, who should be telling the stories?
It should be the news reporters, the people that were trained to do this kind of thing, not just somebody that's making bogus claims on Reddit or Facebook. Somebody that reads the press releases, somebody that reads the wires. Trained professionals should be doing this. Oops. Yeah, they should be doing this kind of thing. Not somebody that's bored and trolling the internet in their parents' basement. It has to be trained professionals that do this kind of thing. And radio is still very much important. A lot of people say, well, the only time we listen to radio these days is when we're in the car. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're listening to the radio in the car, in your garage. It doesn't matter if you're listening to a jazz station while making tea for your grandma in her kitchen. You're still listening to the radio, and businesses play radio stations too. And sometimes people inadvertently hear talk breaks while they're shopping, and they think, wow, that guy is a really good reporter and I enjoy listening to him. And that's why we still need to keep investing in radio and podcasting. And with global warming and climate change, we're inevitably going to have more tropical storms, and when the light goes out, people are going to tune into radio. And that's another reason why we need radio. When we had Hurricane Fiona, lots of people tuned in to listen to the latest news. When the internet went out, or if they couldn't get a phone signal, then radio was there for them. Yeah, it's not a dying industry. It's struggling, but it's not dying. Yeah, and we need to keep it going.
William, how did the media landscape look historically, let's say going back 25, 50 years, and how has it changed to today?
Well, if you go back and let's say you go to the Nova Scotia archives and you see the newspapers, the multitude of newspapers, the different videos and things that are kept in the archives.
Right.
Well, I can go back and let's say you tell me I want to find my great-great-grandmother. Well, I can go back in those news articles and see, was there something about them? Was there an obituary or what have you? Now, where?
Yes.
Where is that? It's just this digital, there's no paper. So how are archives going to keep those records if they exist at all?
Right.
And to Blake's point, great, you have read it, but I don't need to know whether somebody was making tea for their cat. I need to know that a building was being built or something was happening, and I didn't need the opinion. It needs you need the facts, right? And how do you keep those straight?
Right.
So yeah, it is very important. And it has changed so much because you have this digitization, and where do you go for that? So, and you pretty much see around 2000 a cutoff. So a great example is city directories. The city directories was a form of media where you could see Mr. Smith was a carpenter. He lived at 1140 Green Street, and this was, then you can go back and find stuff. Well, without those medias in there like that, you can't do that. So it's very important. And it has been a huge switch. And in a lot of ways, it's been a very negative switch.
Hi, Dario.
Hi.
We have a question from
Let's hear it.
YouTube live chat. So this is a question from Pat Laker News. Question: with the closure of these media outlets like News 95.7, how important do independent media outlets, digital, become to fill that void?
Excellent question.
How can they do that?
Yes. We were getting to that anyway, but do we want to break into it now?
Yeah, let's do it. We've already got the ball rolling with Lighthouse Radio and Lighthouse Media. We're already doing just that. We have an online radio station right now with Nova Scotia artists. We have news on that station, and this broadcast is also being broadcast on that station as we speak. So we have a website and we have written stories as well, and we're hoping to do more. We're hoping to have more programming in the future. So, follow us on Facebook, and we're on a few other socials as well. But Facebook and YouTube, those are the first two to go to for now. But that's how we're filling the void. And I'm doing some volunteer work there now, and I have some ideas for a news station, or a news program rather. And the idea that I have, down the road, is I would really like to do some traffic reports again, because I like to brush up on that skill. I tried it once and it didn't really work out, and I would like to practice doing that. Beside the point, traffic reports are certainly needed in a growing city and in a place where traffic congestion is just too much. In terms of other digital media outlets, I think that they can follow suit by following a similar path, making podcasts, going beyond just writing stories. Think outside the box, make a video, make a podcast, interview somebody, on Facebook Live, just go for it. But whatever you do, make sure that what you're reporting is actual news and not just, pointless opinions that somebody posted on Facebook or on Twitter or what have you.
And for media itself is, one, the quality of it, and two, getting more messaging out there in different varieties and different aspects of communication. So to Blake's point, video and radio, and even in written print, actual physical written print, because there is a bit of a revolution out there. Example, vinyl records.
Yes.
Right, you see a younger generation really going out there and saying, this is cool, man. So I think we have to make the cool man in the room with print and radio again. And I have an old record at home, and it's a series of records, and it's so much fun because you can put it on, and it is the recordings from the 1930s of radio stories, and actually you can listen to old comedians, and they have it on the record, and you can listen to these. And this is the kind of thing where this was the radio of its day. So it's recorded on this record, and you can go back and listen to it. And sometimes I just put it on just because, to think that's how people got messed, and to think that at that moment in time, that was the YouTube of its day, right? That's for when radio that was a heyday of radio feed coming out. And if there was anything going on, kids would come home from school and turn on their favorite radio program. And where is that now? Because, as I said, there's so much noise out there.
Yes.
And we have to trim the fat off of that and make sure that you're getting real content, and people will go to that. Once they realize that that is a good place to go for the content, then that's where they will go to. And they'll leave all that noise out. They'll just go, yeah, that's noise. And also during elections, provincial and municipal and federal elections, where do you go to be able to have that voice, to have that debate, to ask candidates questions? Really important. And now we don't have 95%. I remember going on there and having those questions asked to me when I was running. And that's all important. Now where would you go? Same thing with history stuff. There's a history topic. Where do you go now to do that? I can't just go out there. I could call 95.7 and say, did you know this was going on? You're going to tear this historic place down. No way. And then it would go into this. And then from there, I would get a call from CTV News, Global Media, CBC, usually in that order. And then it would go from there, right? And then it would get more out there. So it started a lot with being able to go onto a radio.
You touched upon something interesting with bringing up vinyl records, and this has been a topic that we've explored throughout this pilot series on Channel 3, which is that there seems to be a backlash to AI-generated content with a return to what's called the analog, the real, physical media, real people, real situations, conversations, real dramas with actors and people who are creative. And yet, we have this sort of dichotomy between these larger institutions, media institutions closing down, this return to the analog, and yet there's this in-between space that nobody seems to know how to fill it in terms of the economic resources in order to support some of these new platforms, like Lighthouse Media, like Channel 3 Halifax. How do we kind of reconcile that?
You're bringing in money now.
Ah, yes.
So that has no emotion, but communications and people do, and so you have to connect the two. Is the emotions and the connectivity have to make economic value sense. So that's the challenge that you're facing there.
Okay.
Is how to make that into a tangible economic value. And it's a smaller media outlet that has that challenge before it from doing that directional shift. Because the people out there have the emotion and have the opinion, but that's translating into how is that economic value to it. Mm-hmm. If you can connect that, then the economic value follows through. What do you think, Ray?
Yes, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. And I do like the idea of physical media and, physical journalism as opposed to AI generated content. AI is good for some things, but, asking it to write up an article is not one of them. I mean, it's one thing to use AI for assistance with that kind of thing, but not, don't go to ChatGPT and say, write an article about X, Y, and Z. No, we don't want that. We want actual people, writing and reporting.
What makes it different?
Because it comes from, an actual human being, not a machine. That's what people want. There's enough fake stuff in the media as it is with social media. We don't need any more. We need, real journalists, real people, and real voices.
AI, it's an environmental hazard in some ways. Have you heard about the data centers and the pollution and
Yes.
everything coming through? Okay, so you got that. I just had to put that out there. And then, if you want AI for spell check, sure. But if you want, as it's saying, with actual writing a whole article, no. I think my skill set of being able to sit there and write an email to someone and making it comprehensive and ask someone 19, well, they're going to go right there. Recently, it was put out that a professor in the university had actually rigged one of the questions and put a particular word inside that they would have to use it somewhere in a paper during the paper exam. And well, guess what? 95% of the class showed that they used AI to generate that. Now, how is that making anyone more intelligent or skilled? Yeah, so I mean, to answer, I'm trying to put more out there in content of saying, well, how is this impacting people and the impact of communication overall? And you don't want AI making a random statement and saying, oh, there was a car bombing today, and actually it didn't happen at all. It's not happening. It's AI. It's generating it. Maybe it wanted to have some fun with you today and come up with a melodrama, right? You can't do that. So do we want a constant April Fools to happen? I don't. Certainly with not media. No.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So what do local broadcasters bring to media that AI can't do?
For one thing, accurate traffic reports. I mean, you can go on ChatGPT and ask what's the traffic, and it won't know. And it'll say, or you can ask what's happening at the Legion in Cheticamp tomorrow. Again, nothing, because it's not public knowledge. It's not put out there the same way that other big news stories are. That's another thing that comes with local media, is being able to promote local events. Many cases, local events that are fundraisers that are for a good cause.
Well, we brought up the economic factor. So who should fund local media? Is this something that should be supplied by the municipality, by the city, by the people, or should it be a corporation that's out there to strive to make profit, but also provide local news at the same time?
Well, I think that, public broadcasting, companies like CBC and community stations and, for-profit broadcasters, I think that they can coexist.
Okay.
But, I think that when it comes to funding, I think that, for-profit broadcasters and that are committed to local journalism and committed to the community and not committed to, billionaires overseas, should be given priority. And another thing that should be given priority is not-for-profit, local stations and the CBC. And I think that a municipal government or the provincial government or even the federal government should come up with some kind of an incentive where they say, hey, listen, if you can come up with a station or a radio station or a media outlet that's committed to local events, local journalism, local sports, that kind of thing, then we'll give you X, Y, and Z amount of money, but certain conditions have to be met, like 80% of the content has to be local, less than 10% can be syndicated, and you need to hire a workforce. You can't just have automation doing everything all the time. And that's something that we're missing. A lot of times, blue Tories will say, oh, we don't need the CBC anymore because, we have privatized journalism now and we have the internet. But we keep saying that not everything on the internet is reliable. And sadly, a lot of, for-profit, news outlets, are not even news anymore. It's all just propaganda. If you have something that's government funded, then they're going to have to report on actual news and not show bias towards a political party. So that's why, that's why not-for-profit journalism, publicly funded media, and for-profit companies that are committed to local media, should take priority.
Big question, because the one problem with in today's world, if you look at the United States,
Yes.
there's like 60 Minutes. Look what's going on with that. And then you have publicly funded stations like PBS that were being cut with the government funding. But then what is government's message? Because you look around the world and you'll see those kind of stations actually is a way for the government to get these messages, the institutional message of where they want the mass to go out there. So publicly funded through government, it depends on the political situation, and you just have to be careful with that. And also, if the station becomes too reliant on that, then you look at CBC and there's cuts and then there's changes. So, example is when I would try to reach out about a historical, CBC was usually the last one to answer or even not answer the outlet. The private, more for-profit stations like CTV or Rogers would answer them first. There was an incentive for them because they are producing a product to which they needed to produce the product. It gave them that incentive, whereas perhaps maybe the publicly funded one was, we'll still get the public money. So do we really need to run that message? And does the government tell us to have a different message? It is, I'm just stating risks. We have to just be blunt with it, right?
What I'm hearing is that we should have all of these various media outlets expressing their voices, but how do we balance it? And how would you like to see that translate into a vision of future media production here in Halifax?
I'll give you a chance for that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Well, we've talked about how we have all of these different voices from small media to large media. How can we balance it out to have all of these media outlets coexist and sustain themselves so that these voices can continue to be expressed?
Well, I think that if a radio station, that is committed to, reporting on what the community wants, then chances are people are going to tune into them as opposed to, say, a station that broadcasts, syndicated music from Toronto. I think that, the more local content that we, put out there, the more likely, the locals are going to tune into those stations. They're not going to bother with syndicated music anymore. Unless, when I say syndicated music, I'm talking about a station that rebroadcasts, music from Toronto. I'm not talking about, a music station that has a local host and occasionally talks about, local content. But the more local content you put out there, the more you go out into the community and report on things, the more likely I think people are going to tune into those, and the other stations that don't, could end up being treated like a fly on the wall unless they get their act together.
All right, Dario. Yeah, we have another question from the YouTube live
All right,
chat.
go for it.
Yeah, from Pat Laker News. The question is, what do you think of local journalism initiative funding from the federal government, even the Google funding?
Well, again, it goes into is media content being controlled? Media needs to be free. And Nova Scotia, for a historical point, you have Joseph Howe. Went to jail for that one, right? So we have a long-standing history of this freedom of the press. And that has to be a keynote to that. So there shouldn't be any strings attached. If it's government should not be putting any strings attached to it, and knowing that it's helping democracy. Because when you have that freedom in a professional manner that's laid out in a good guideline, then you're able to deliver information that will not just last for that moment, but someone like me can go back in 20 years' time and go, that's what was happening. And know that that is accurate information. Because you don't want that, right? You don't want in 20 years' time somebody, gee, what happened on that day? You imagine, for example, like the Halifax explosion, if we had someone on Reddit existed then, and the things that would have been coming out, right? And even at that time frame, if you think about it, there were reports, because it happened during World War I, this was an enemy attack, those things still were coming out even then.
Yeah.
But it was about filtration of the information because it was through journalists, newspapers, and radios, or what have you. Those contents were then cleared through, and that's through time. But now, how's that going to look back? That's my thought, is how are you going to look back at those, and how did those fundings impact that?
I couldn't have said it better myself, but I think being a journalist also means that you just can't be biased towards a certain political party anymore. You can't operate a news outlet that's local the same way that they operate CNN or Fox News. You have to be 100% neutral and completely unbiased. You just have to report. because we can't run a if it bleeds it leads model either. We just have to report on the news the way it is, the way that Walter Cronkite used to, because that's how they used to do it before things got out of hand. Walter Cronkite reported the news exactly the way it was. None of this bias nonsense that you get in the media nowadays. Enough is enough. We don't need any more bias. We just need the news, and that's the way that things need to operate now.
What advice would you give young creators such as myself with Channel 3 Halifax and Lighthouse Media, now that you've been part of the media outlet, the media sphere here in Halifax? What advice would you give to us as digital creators trying to forge a new voice on a digital platform?
Just be open, transparent, and honest about the delivery of your messaging, and make sure that you try and reach as many people as possible, and that they know that you're delivering something in a professional manner, that they can be reliable on. It's not just putting information out there. It's about the contents of the message and how are you presenting that information. Mm-hmm. Because I can think of, there was from the United States, a journalist, and they say, oh, it was torrential, and they were out there and the pouring rain, and they made it look like it was really, and then all of a sudden they stopped, and they didn't need to suddenly hold on to the telephone pole anymore. It wasn't so windy after all. It's, be forthright with it.
If you're going to report on the news in an independent capacity, you want to make sure that you check your sources. If you get a questionable email that you're not sure is from, an accurate source, check it, Google it, make phone calls. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Don't just because it says press release doesn't mean that it's accurate. And if you have a wire service like the Canadian Press, a rule of thumb is you don't need to check, all the sources there because it's already been checked by the Canadian Press. But if in doubt, just don't report on it. If it looks suspicious, just don't report on it. Don't, take any risks, just to get people gossiping or just to get ratings. It's accurate journalism is more important than getting ratings in many cases.
But with our fragmented sources of information today, is it really important to be getting it from one singular source anyhow? Maybe we should just adopt this fragmented sphere that we live in and continue to just build information from our individual perspectives.
But then, if you're looking at something as a newspaper archive, as you're saying, Walter Cronkite, reporting on the Apollo missions. Can you imagine if there was 13 others that were reporting on that, and how that would skew that? And you don't want that. You want to be able to have accurate, timely news, and that really matters. And if I'm going to go on and be interviewed, I don't want myself being attached to something that is not going to have that kind of professionalism to it. People are trying to put information there, and they want to make sure that it's on a trusted platform.
Then why have these larger media outlets closed?
A lot of it has to do with the fact that they're being run by giant corporations that are just trying to save money, because these local stations, for them, they're just not making the money. They're not, and they need the money to pay off their shareholders over in Timbuktu. And they don't seem to care about the community, which is really sad. It's all about the bottom line. And that's why we need nonprofit journalism and for-profit journalism that is committed. Even if it's a small family-owned company, like I used to work for a small family-owned company in northern Manitoba that that relied on the radio station because there were people that didn't even have the internet. or even TV for that matter. So they listened in, and if it was owned by a multi-billion-dollar corporation, they would probably just shut it down because for them it's not making them the billions of dollars that they want, which is really unfortunate. And that's I'll say it once and I'll say it again. We need not-for-profit and for-profit media that is committed to the community.
But why can't local media make money to support itself?
Well, let's think about how it's trying to make the money, right? It's advertisements, and then you're having to compete with these larger institutions like Rogers Media. So in Canada, we have pretty much risking a monopoly or an oligarchy on many different platforms, not just in media, but even in minerals, banking, you name it. There's just a top 5 or top 3, and then it's a trickle down. So I think local has to think about local, and that's how they can make the money to sustain themselves. So the goal should not be to actually think we're going to make lots of money. We're actually thinking about we're making the money we need to run this and be there for people. It's kind of like public transit. Do you expect public transit to make money? You expect it to be there. And local media has to be there like that. It's a need, necessity really. And you think back, as you're saying, with hurricanes and climate change issues. Well, if we didn't have that, sometimes grandma's rotary telephone is a great thing to still have around. It's over in the corner, and everyone kind of goes, what is that? I go, that will stay there after the hurricane, the house falls down. You're still going to be able to ring that dial on there. And we need that to be the local news. And there's lots of opportunities to do that. Maybe the radio stations could put cooking companies on, or storytellers, and charge them money, charge them a fee for coming on, and do it that way. You have to get inventive and creative. You can't just stay with, we're going to do an advertising now. That advertising ad is the same company you're going for a Google that Rogers. Of course, Rogers is going to get it before the local station is. But it doesn't mean you don't have that niche marketing, guerrilla marketing. You need a better marketing strategy. You're not looking to compete. You're looking to be, right? So I just say, I'm not looking to compete with you. I'm looking to eliminate the stress of you. Because those big companies are just that. It's very stressful. So you just take that out of the equation and just be you, which is delivering that content and getting creative with that. People want to have that connection. So, have fundraisers, do those things. I didn't see that with local stations. They didn't try to support themselves. They were relying on those big corps. And so once those big corps said, we're not making what we want because we're not delivering the value to put on the stock exchange, well, then cut you go. Yeah.
So where can Channel 3 Halifax go from here in order to get that support to build its platform so that it can survive?
I think of it as in the running for council, and how do you get the message out there? You have limited funds. They're donated in, so it was all public. And how do you get it out there? Well, you pick and choose. If you can come up with your own content and try to do it with a Facebook boost, or do a test and see, is it better to use YouTube or is it better to use Facebook? Which one, and which demographics? You have to chart the demographics and see who's where with it. And are you maybe using a Blue Sky or what? You have to use these social media platforms that are out there and see, would an Eastlink pick it up? Maybe they might, local community Eastlink pick this up. Then you also have to look at well, could I maybe go outside of Halifax? Maybe someone wants to hear in the valley, wants to hear the news in here, and could you provide that to them? There's a number of places you want to expand, but you have to make out a good business plan for it.
Yes.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And just before I give my opinion on that, I just want to clarify something I mentioned about the Canadian Press or wire services. If you're using one, if you're planning to use one for your new media source, sometimes the Canadian Press does make mistakes, or wire services. So if you see something on there that they reported on that's questionable, if in doubt, check your sources, and or don't report on it if you're not sure. But that's another story. For when it comes to advertising for a radio station and making money, it doesn't hurt to think outside the box. If doing it the old way, charging X, Y, and Z number of dollars for X, Y, and Z number of ads, then you can offer flexible options. Maybe this will entice more people to buy ad space. And it starts off small, but then it creates a ripple effect when more people decide to buy ad space when they know that they can afford it. And this was something that could be very helpful for small family-owned businesses that live in Halifax and beyond. And another way that stations could make money is by helping with pledge shows. One station that I worked at, we had pledge shows where we would charge a fee. I don't know how much it was, but maybe like $200 or $300 an hour by the charity. And then, we would raise money for that charity, and at the same time, we would make a profit as well. Only this time, we were helping out somebody that's making a difference. And another way to make money is station merchandise. I'm brainstorming ideas myself for Lighthouse Media merchandise. I have my heart set on some Lighthouse Media smart speakers or Lighthouse Media headphones that have the logo on it. I think that's going to be really cool, if you ask me. And maybe even Lighthouse Media cutting boards. Get some print-on-demand merchandise. Sell those to your listeners. And if you have somebody that bought a T-shirt for your media outlet and they're walking around the Micmac Mall wearing it, people are going to say, "Oh, that's interesting, Lighthouse Radio. Maybe I'll download the app myself." That could just happen with you as well. But you do have to be flexible. You can't expect certain people to buy the ad packages that big companies would buy. You have to. Some people might, but you also have to be flexible and be mindful of the fact that not all businesses are going to make the same amount of money. So try to reach out to them and think outside the box.
So the PBS model still works, you think?
For sure. 100%. I think I love PBS. I grew up watching it, and PBS Kids shows like Arthur and Zoom and Wishbone. I watched all those, and then I would watch the pledge drive that they have, and I didn't know what the heck that they were doing, but now I know that they were trying to pay the bills. And if you got to do it that way, so be it.
Blake, why do you enjoy being a radio host?
It gives me an opportunity to share stories, to keep people informed. And when I hear people say, "Oh, I heard you on the radio and thank you for informing us during the pandemic," which is something that happened, it gives you a good feeling. And if, knowing that somebody's listening to you, even if it's somebody in the car, 4 kilometers away, it just feels great. And when I interview people, I get to learn about people learn things about people that I didn't know, and then share that with others. And that's what I do with my podcast right now, which is called The Medley. I've interviewed all kinds of people. Our motto is all kinds of different, or our slogan is all kinds of different. That's a volunteer thing that I do, but I love it.
And William, why are you passionate about civic issues?
Well, it affects everybody's life, and we need to engage together more. As much as social media and the digital age seems to have brought people together, it actually has made them farther apart. There's nothing more annoying than not being able to in an office for someone who's 23 and me being still very young. But will they message? They're messaging on this instant messaging thing when they're sitting right there. I'm going, and I see the message come up, and I look at them and go, yeah, so you wanted a pencil? Okay, here's the pencil. It's like they can't talk to you. Do they not have a voice? I don't know. So there's that part of it, and that's, to me, that has been lost in a big community way. So I feel that, how can you communicate with someone down the street? Will that make it so you can just walk down the street and someone's going to say, oh, hello, or nod their head or smile or something? That only happens if they know who you kind of are, or they hear your voice and you get chased down the street. That's another story for another day. But it's important that you still have that kind of connection and a skill set. It feels like there's a skill set being lost, and not being able to have that human interaction, that you have to do it through Facebook. I don't need to know when you fed your cat. Maybe some people do. Personally, I don't. Maybe that's a bias. But that's why it's important to have those things, because there's a lot of big issues. So what I'm saying is the cat's a little issue. It's very important to the person. Love cats, nothing against them. Just so if anyone's watching, no cat hate out there. But where you're going to find out that this major demolition is happening, or that there's an emergency situation. And those are all important out there. So what we're talking about is media and community and all that.
And that's actually what Channel 3 Halifax is attempting to be. We want to be a digital stage where we bring people together in a space so we can interact, so we can have conversations. See, the two of you are sitting here with me. We're talking. We're having a real conversation. This is exciting. But we're also using digital media to transmit this message to other people and try and reach people who can't physically be here. So it's sort of a hybridization of the two worlds. Do you think those two worlds can coexist?
Sure. Even if you could put this on the clips that are before the movies, if you're in the movie theaters, put like a 10-minute video of this or whatever time they allow. They used to do that back in the day.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't see that anymore. I see a lot of ads for popcorns. Right?
Blake, it's 2030. What does Halifax look like to you then?
Well, hopefully they have the BRT system built by then so that we can reduce the traffic. But I think that if we have entrepreneurs that believe that it can be done and we can get more media outlets, then hopefully they'll go ahead and do it. And that we can have traffic reports, every 10 minutes, 24/7. How would that be? That'd be awesome. And that's what I see. I see more media outlets, more radio stations covering not only local things, but multicultural events, stations broadcasting in different languages, because we are a very multicultural city. But that can only happen, if we have, committed media outlets and committed entrepreneurs that are entirely committed to the HRM.
What about you, William? How does 2030 look to you?
Oh, do you want the happy version or the depressed version?
A little of both.
A little of both. Happy, okay, we're going happy. Happy is that we are growing and developing and being positive about making impacts to the city to which improve our environment and put out there a place so that Halifax can be a city that people can come to and live in, and not just, because for a long time it was pretty hard to find a job, right? And that's where I go into the depressed part, because I think urban planning policies and that have been put in are having very negative effects on livability. And so far, the charting for affordability and many other aspects of traffic could make someone lose their hair very quickly. And how's that going to look with the ever-changing climate? And we look at how many fires and the heat. This is the first time since the news. I was watching the news weather report. This was the first time that you had 3 days of consecutive 30 degrees. Usually we'd have a 30-degree go down a little bit, but it's been very steady over the 30-degree mark. Today was the cooler day, and that hadn't. The meteorologist said that kind of thing hasn't happened since the 1940s. In Halifax in particular. And I could say that. I could think back growing up here all my life. Yeah, we had some hot days, but for this prolonged amount of time, not really, not that I can remember. And our climate is changing. So how is that impacting? And now council is putting something about shorelines and reducing the need for protection of the shorelines within the municipal. And I saw this online, and I haven't investigated, so anyone out there, please go and investigate. But it's one of those things that, are we doing enough for our environment? So my thing has been a lot about historic homes and buildings. It's very clear from European studies that that is a big factor in reducing needs for resources. There's not enough resources on this planet for all the people out there, and we would run out very, very quick. So we have to use what we've got. And Halifax is doing a demolition of its historic places at an alarming rate, faster than what it did in the 1960s for urban renewal plans, like the Cogswell and that. And what is happening with the Cogswell? Those areas are growth nodes. And to Blake's point about traffic, how will that impact that? Can a 300-year-old street like Hollis Street couple on and handle 1 million people?
Especially with a growing population.
Right, and how do you fix, you can't widen, well, if you widen the road, you have to demolish a big office building like 1801 Hollis. You're not going to do that anytime soon. So you have a bike lane and buses that can't turn on the corner. So how do you fit all of this infrastructure into X space? You just can't. So you're going to have to relay things out. So you're going into a big discussion there. You opened up a big hole.
You mean we're not going to have teleportation technology by 2030?
Maybe if they have flying cars, I can see that. Maybe they'll have AI-induced self-driving cars, and then they'll drive us maybe off into the harbor. I don't know.
I like the idea of having an elevated monorail or a light rail or something in the city. Building a subway in Halifax because of all the rocks and everything is out of the question. But I like the idea of having an elevated railway. I think that would 100% help with the traffic. Would it reduce the traffic congestion? Absolutely. Would it prevent it altogether? No. But that's another story.
Well, with the government to get to this point, in the 90s, there was along Joseph Howe, there was a railway line that was there. They tore that up, and now that would have been the perfect way to get people in, right? It was through that kind of line. And what I found was there was actually, in the 40s, and that there was a train that went from Bedford to Halifax, and and you could get on the train there, the Bedford station, and come down to the downtown station in Halifax. Cost you like 10 cents or something back in the day.
Those were the days.
Where did it go? It's kind of like local media, that kind of local transportation went away because government cut it, or private couldn't keep up with paying for the expense of it. And now we're needing that back. But then the government pulled the infrastructure out that is there. Now, I found technology that's out there that doesn't need rail lines. You're going to have railless, they ran on tracks instead, and they're huge. It looks like a giant caterpillar. They can swerve. In China, they have them, and they swerve around even vehicles and things, which, I've been in cities where there's Cairo, for example, 25 million people. The air pollution, wow, never experienced anything like it. And we have organized lights and little yellow and white lines on the road. Oh no, there's nothing like that there. There isn't. It's a lot of beeping. It's a whole language in beeps. And they had to pilot themselves. And I go, I don't know what you're saying, so don't worry about it. But is that where Halifax is going? That's a question. What does 2030? 2030 is not that long away. If you said to me 2080, I'd be okay. But 2030 is really just around the corner. And I see a lot of livability and affordability issues because we are stifled in salaries. People, because there's this shareholder need and these bigger companies and that, there seems to be government money coming in, but this government money is a very tradition in Halifax. So it's surrounding the military, and the city was created on military. And from 1749 onwards, it's military that kind of pushed economics. And you can see that during the American Revolution, the runs on the blockades. During World War I and World War II, huge amounts of population of armed forces personnel coming in. There was a massive shortage of housing. The government had to come in and make around Westmount Division and that to make these temporary houses now have turned into 60 plus in 100-year-old homes now that people do live in still. And we have this cycle. There's a federal government cycle of bringing in money, and now we're in that wave. It comes every 25, 50 years. Pretty even on that in Halifax. So once that runs out, then things start to go down, and then it comes back up again when the government needs something. So right now, what we need to factor in is climate, big time, and how is the federal government and local and provincial governments going to respond to this? Because taxation and infrastructure costs, we can't keep up with it. You'd have to ask for the firstborn to pay for all of this, really. Yeah.
So if I could snap my fingers and make a wish come true for each of you, what would it be?
Stop tearing down the historic buildings.
Okay.
So that's number one.
I would say have a lot more, committed local media that is owned by companies that, that care about the HRM and Nova Scotia as a whole, and not just shareholders.
And that's a beautiful way to end tonight's conversation, which has been the attempt for Channel 3 Halifax. We started this pilot series with 3 episodes. We started the first episode with storytelling, and we looked at local storytellers sharing their stories and how stories are shared in the city. In our second episode, we looked at some artists. We looked at how the artistic scene is shaping in Halifax and some of the challenges for artists that are present today. And today we looked at the media landscape and the future of Halifax based on its present conditions. And we're seeing that there are a lot of changes taking place. We've recognized that there are these new media outlets like ourselves trying to come out there with a new voice, like Lighthouse Media. We definitely are part of a changing landscape. We've also noticed through our conversations that the economic factor is a huge barrier for a lot of these creative people to come forward in order to express themselves. And we're really trying to find a nice medium in order to spread this around and be able to relate to others and to be able to communicate with others. And that's what we've been doing here at Channel 3 Halifax. We're testing this out. It's been an experiment. It's been a lovely experiment because I've got to meet really interesting people. The 3 storytellers in our first episode, the 3 artists in our second episode, and the 2 of you tonight. And it is that human connection that we really still need to foster to continue because we are, in fact, human beings. And whether we use digital technology to transmit our ideas and our feelings and emotions to others, that's just another media. It is just another platform for us to express ourselves. But at the end of the day, it is all about the human connection, human communication, and sharing our experiences with each other in order to grow, to learn, to expand. And I really feel that that's the essence of the human condition. And really, what we're doing with these digital media platforms, we're trying to create that connection between us and transmitting it out there to viewers who happen to be anywhere on their devices capturing this transmission. Would you like to add any final comments before we close tonight's discussion?
Just thank you for having me and making an attempt to get some local content out there and make sure that that doesn't just completely disappear.
Do you think this can work?
I think it can work, but you know, you're going to have to sell a lot of merch, maybe some cupcakes.
Some cupcakes? Did you
Uh,
try the brownies?
I haven't, but I will.
Okay.
I promise. And make sure that you just keep getting the message out there.
I would just like to say, be sure to check out Lighthouse Media and Lighthouse Radio. And if you have any ideas for content, don't hesitate to reach out. We would love to hear from you.
Great. And same with Channel 3 Halifax. As we grow and expand, we welcome any invitations from viewers out there who are interested in helping with the programming of the station, to see if you'd like to volunteer to become a producer and create your own show. We'd love to work with you. The future of Channel 3 is unknown. I started on episode 1 with the idea that Channel 3 Halifax is a dream. And we've gone through the preface where we did a test in June. We've gone through now chapter 1 with these 3 episodes in the summer, this pilot series. So chapter 1 has now been written. What chapter 2 and the subsequent chapters will present still remains to be a bit of an unknown. But the passion is there, the commitment is there, and people like yourselves are there. And that's what makes this exciting, and I think this is the future of Halifax. And with that, I'd like to say thank you, Blake and William, for being here tonight. Thank you, Matt, for running the technical and the live stream for all 3 series and being a part of this from the beginning. And thank you, Michael, for also co-producing this series with me, being my support, and being that critical voice to help me think about the ideas and develop the programming that we've presented this summer. Thank you all for viewing and being part of this and being connected to us online, and we look forward to seeing what Channel 3 Halifax will develop in the future. Thank you very much, and have yourselves a great evening.
And that's a wrap.
And that's a wrap. And I really need to pee, so I'll...